Hi, I'm so glad that you've joined me again, and I'm Judith from His Unmeasured Grace, and I'm here to talk to you today about keep your mouth shut. And this is the lesson we're doing today in journaling through James. And you can also, I'll tell you at the end about the course that I have that goes along with this and takes us into a deeper level. So, do you have trouble keeping your mouth shut? Now, anything I say today, I want you to know that I'm not directing it just at you, because these things continually convict me as well. Because I can go through a good period of time with it, and then, you get kind of used to everything, and you start having to backtrack because you're doing the same things again, if you're like me at all. And I'm assuming that if you're married, or even if you're not, you have people in your life that you struggle with your tongue. And so I hope this really helps you today. And because it's easier to say too much than to keep your mouth shut. And James 3 is filled to the brim with wise counsel on keeping your mouth shut. It teaches us the seriousness of keeping our mouths shut rather than spewing vicious and hurting words out when we are provoked. And I know most of us don't go around doing that on a regular basis, but sometimes we get kind of used to the people we live with and we rub each other the wrong way. So that I'm going to talk to you about this today, knowing that maybe you're like me and you have these moments, and maybe it's not with all viciousness, but the viciousness can be in our hearts. And even if our maybe it's just our tone, you can say the very same thing with a different tone, and it can be taken two different ways. So this study did me as much good in reminding me to be more careful with the words that come out of my mouth, and I hope it will do the same for you. So let's dig in. I want you to first pause the video and read James 3, 1 through 12. Those are the verses on our mouth. And it's the one chapter in the whole Bible that really digs into it. I won't be reading the whole thing to you, but I'll be reading a few verses here and there. So this is the key verse, I think. And if you think another verse is a key verse, let me know in the comments. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. That's pretty strong, right? That's from James 3:6. And I find James to be very direct, and I kind of like that because I kind of need it. So here's some reasons to keep your mouth shut. We live in a country where we have free speech, right? You can say anything you want, and especially to your husband, so we think, or subconsciously think, and you can say the same things you want to your friend. And what about those times we get the short end of the stick and somebody does something unkind to us? We are told in our society that we can respond in any way. We have those kind of rights. And most people would say that you can say anything to anyone any way you want. You can defend your rights and do that any way you want. Isn't that what we hear? And the thing is that Jesus lived out a totally different way of responding and reacting to people when he was ridiculed, beaten, and crucified. And that pretty much covers all the possible scenarios of mistreatment that we as wives could possibly have, so that you can take encouragement from not being alone, because Jesus went through a lot. So, I mean, if you have a bad situation, and a lot of us in some way do, because our lives are not perfect. We are human, we fail, and I'm not saying our situation is way extreme, but we get used to the situation we have, and we can respond and think it's bad in the realm of what we are accustomed to. So that this is written, I think, to everybody, and we can all benefit from these verses. So together we're going to look at this and see how we can respond with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit directing our every action. So did you read James 3, 1 to 12 thoughtfully and prayerfully? I hope you did. So I read this passage just today, just before I started it. It's a good chapter or verses to read often. And so, how are your interactions with your children? Because one thing I learned and failed at many, many times was that my interactions, they last for an eternity. And the eternity of our children hangs in the balance between you and your child. And your children are the one thing that you can take, or people that you can take to heaven. You can't take your personal belongings to heaven, can you? And there are three things that you can do with your tongue, according to James 3, 1 through 12. Your tongue can offend. Your tongue can be like fire. It spreads evil. And your tongue is unruly. And you say, why me? We all want to present ourselves really, really in a perfect light to anybody we know and people around us. And we often do to people when we go to church or out of the store or whatever event we're at. But we come home, close the door, and it can be a whole different story, especially when our buttons are pushed. So besides being an organ in our body that allows humans to articulate and communicate, the tongue has the power of a weapon on others. And okay, the word tongue is a noun. It's a fleshly, muscular organ in the mouth of a mammal. Okay, so I think all, or just about all, God's pretty creative and things can be different. Mammals use their tongue for tasting, licking, swallowing, but in humans, we are able to articulate and speak. And the tongue has no bones, and it's strong enough to break a heart. So be careful with your words. Be careful with your words. Once they are said, they can only be forgiven, not forgotten. And to illustrate this point, I can remember some things my dad said to me when I was like 13. And I can remember things my husband said to me years ago. And I can remember interactions with my children and other people, but especially those people that are dearest to me. So that hurts, right? Just remember that anything you say in that moment that you are upset and frustrated for whatever reason, any words that come out of your mouth will not be forgotten if they hurt the person really bad, because those hurts we take with us, and we might take a mixed up version of it, but we do. So when your husband is talking and you interject your point, and I do this, you are telling your husband or your friend that your opinion is more important than what they are saying or your husband is saying. It's really important with our husband that we remember these things. And this interrupting habit, if you have that, can get even worse behind closed doors when nobody's looking. We think nobody's looking. God's there, though. Your husband is expressing his feelings, and he's telling you about something. And if you constantly interrupt with contradictions or corrections to what he's saying, it's just not good. Even if he's telling you things, my husband will tell me something, and he'll be talking to me and explaining things, and he doesn't like me to share my point right then. And, you know, it breaks their the continuity of what they're saying and makes it, they can lose their train of thought. You can take what they're saying a whole different direction. So the situation doesn't matter. The conversation, it really doesn't matter. So what if I told you a story of a couple where the husband was always and forever cutting his wife down? And she was a sweet wife, of course, and would often keep her mouth shut. On the other hand, there were times that she couldn't contain herself, and the cuts and things she would return and say back just would flow from her mouth. And when the pressure became too strong, she would cave, and for weeks would turn on her husband, always and forever telling him ways that he could and should stop using his words in such a discouraging way. You might be thinking that she had every right to defend herself and explain to her husband why he shouldn't be treating her that way. But that's not correct. and it won't help the situation. And if she continues that approach, she will never get the response that she wants, and she won't get the closeness she wants, probably desires deep in her heart with her husband. And especially as you age, the children leave the home. And so I want to stress that whatever your situation, if it's that or something similar or extreme or not so extreme, your situation, the thing that made that happen or caused you to respond doesn't matter. You need to remember your manners. I need to remember my manners. And you must wait your turn to talk. And I'm not saying that you can never explain to your husband what he's doing that's offending you, but they're probably not in that moment. And because he won't have his ear for that then, and he won't develop that level of love that you want him to have for you. Keeping your mouth shut will show your husband that you respect him, and keeping your mouth shut will earn the opportunity to express your opinion some other time. So I'm not saying that you never can express that. So also, keep your mouth shut after you ask forgiveness. How many of us have asked forgiveness and said, but you did this and this and this, and then we want to explain all the things that offended us? I've done that, believe me. And balance is an important thing that needs to be remembered where our mouths are concerned. When you have hurt someone, it's not the time to keep your mouth shut when you've hurt them. You need to be asking them for their forgiveness. And contrary to what some are teaching out there or not teaching, that when we offend somebody, we are to ask forgiveness. There is a thing around there somewhere out there that you don't need to ask forgiveness. And I definitely don't believe that or agree with it. It isn't okay to do wrong. And it isn't okay to keep going if nothing was said to ask forgiveness. You need to reconcile that relationship that's dear to you, or even if it's not a dear relationship to you. We need to own our wrongdoings and ask forgiveness because Jesus shed his blood for that. And it says in Matthew, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood. And without shedding of blood is no remission of your sin at all. And that's Hebrews 9:22. I'm sorry, there's 2 verses here. And then leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way, and first be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer thy gift. So if you have your offering to give in church, or something you're going to do for church or for somebody, and you have something wrong with somebody, you better rush back to that person and ask their forgiveness. That's from Matthew 5:24 and Hebrews 9:22. So when you are asking forgiveness of your husband, children, or your friend, that is where it's easy to mess up. Do not give an explanation and defend yourself when you say those short words of I'm sorry. You don't want to defend yourself. You're asking forgiveness and you're saying you're sorry. You don't want to say why you felt you did it and why it was their fault and you responded that way, and if they hadn't done that, then you wouldn't have acted like that. An apology like that devalues your apology and asking forgiveness. And all you need is a simple apology, just 2 words, I'm sorry. And I like to add, will you please forgive me for, When you follow with reasons and validations for your actions, you might as well have skipped the apology altogether. And I've been there. I've done that. So we're all human, and so are you. When you want to criticize your husband or somebody else if you're not married, and that hurts. Major conviction going on. And when you are hurt or you're angry or you're jealous of your husband, and your husband is belittling or berating you, because it happens, returning caustic comments or trying to explain to your husband how he is hurting you is doing nothing other than bringing your marriage to a lower level of communication. It's not going to help, and it's not going to bring up that communication as much as if you're able to allow Jesus to work through you and to be just to take it for a little bit. And there are verses in 1 Peter 3, no, it's in 2, and it's 18 to the end of the chapter or something, that are wonderful, that talk about that. And it's a bad habit and not much different than what you perceive your husband is doing to you. Once you say the wrong things back, I always tell myself I'm as wrong or more wrong than he was in the first place, because I did something wrong too. And it hurts your husband emotionally more than we realize, because they act tough about it, and maybe they'll say things back that aren't acting like they're hurt, but they are. And it will make it more and more difficult to reconcile your situation. And you want to grow closer and have more love as the years go by. And it's so much better to walk with Jesus in this and with the help of the Holy Spirit. It's the only way you can do that. So another thing that you can do to your husband is subtly, because who would do it openly, be passively aggressive towards him and make him feel stupid, ugly, dumb, or insignificant. That's not really something, that's something we do maybe in a subtle way, but we don't want to. So in closing, I know that this is digging deeper than you may have wanted to go. It's deeper than I want to go again. And as I review and create this video, and sometimes when I do these things, I have more of a challenge with dealing with this again in my life, and it can be hard. And I have to remember what I just taught. So maybe you don't have these issues. Maybe you have the perfect marriage, and your tongue isn't an issue, and that's wonderful, and praise God for that. And you might be someone who would be encouraged in this discussion, like me, even teaching this to you. Just take this to heart and go through this, read through James, and do it again, meditate on it often, and it will help you so much. So what other way, or what ways is God speaking to your heart through these verses? So I will link to my blog posts where you can get the other blog posts, but I also want to tell you about the course I created for James. I think that studying James for a woman is so, so important. My course is called Journaling Through James, and you will take it and do it in about a month. And it's broken down into small chunks that you can do each day in about 15 minutes is the intention. And if it takes you longer, you just take longer. It's worth studying James. It teaches us how to respond in all situations. And it's written to men and women, but I think it's so applicable to us as women. So it will be in the description below. So just open that up, the see more, and you can take to a page. You'll be taken to a page that will tell you more about it. So thank you so much for listening today, and I hope this blessed you.